Hello, Adam. Welcome to Classics Corner. So starting off, would you like to introduce yourself, what it is you do?
My name's Adam. I'm an ancient Greek reenactor, and I suppose you could say an experimental archaeologist. I'm a member of the Greek Phalanx, with the largest ancient Greek reenactment group in North America. And we also work with a few different sort of authors and historians to try and practically test theories that scholars put forward about hoplite warfare, to really get into that living history side of it.
How long have you been doing this? What got you into the reenactment community?
So I started getting really into ancient Greece when I was about 6 or 7, and it was for a birthday present. I got an amazing 300 replica helmet. That is crap. It's actually, I still have it. It's actually up there. It's one of the only things that I sort of kept. And then my first event was just before COVID, I think. So yeah, I've been doing it for, I'll say around 5 or 6 years. And then my first big event was Plataea in 2022. So that was sort of a global meetup for sort of all the hoplite reenactors at the battlefield of Plataea in 2022. It was a week-long event, super awesome. And that's where I actually met Andrew and John, who started the Greek Phalanx group. And now we're actually one of the largest growing groups in the whole hoplite reenactment community. So we're getting a lot bigger. Every event now, we're like, I don't know who half these people are. They're all new. I guess you can say I really started reenacting when I was 15. So I had really sort of leveled up my kit from the, Amazon and eBay rubbish, and sort of started to get into that stuff around 2018, I want to say.
But you mentioned the eBay and Amazon armor, and I think that this is maybe a good question to dive into for people who are less familiar with what it means to be like a historical reenactor. So for people who might watch this and don't know, how would you describe the difference between cosplay and then historical reenactment?
Right, that's an excellent question, actually. So the sort of way I would describe this is cosplayers and reenactment sort of a completely different beast in a way. So you're both creating outfits, but they're for completely different outcomes. So a cosplay, typically you are recreating it to resemble typically a fictional character from some form of media. You're not using, real armors and real historical references. You're using polyurethane and plastic and foam and all of this stuff to make something that looks cool. It's a sort of a costume. What we try and do in reenactment and sort of living history is, as accurately as we can, recreate historical items, clothing, food, camp life, military equipment, as authentically as we can, to sort of get a little time travel experience of what it was sort of like to be a hoplite from the 6th, 4th centuries BC. So that's sort of the differences. One of them is making a costume to sort of go to Comic-Cons and dress up as a fictional character, and nothing against cosplayers. They're enjoying it. That's awesome. The other one is trying to sort of get in touch with the people of the past.
And it sounds like your journey there was one of kind of incremental, a little bit better along the way, and until you finally got your full kit together.
Well, as all reenactors say, is any kit ever finished? So it's sort of a never-ending spiral. And that's one thing why I really wanted to start my channel, is I wanted to, for one, sort of fill a void of YouTube that was missing for ancient Greek history. There was always something that, 12-year-old me wanted to watch ancient Greek videos of the same. And that was sort of my main goal for starting this channel, is I wanted to especially inspire younger folks into history. You can really get started in this in a way where most hoplites weren't fully equipped, right? And some of my favorite impressions, which I've a little bit hypocritical as I don't have one myself, but is that minimalist kit of, helmet and shield and spear, and there's your hoplite, because it really brings home that these guys are just people, right? Just like us, except happened to live 2,500 years ago.
What type of soldier do you currently reenact? Where are they from, and when are they from?
My main panoply is an archaic panoply, so around 550 BC. So this is before the Persian Wars. And I wanted to recreate a Laconian figurine. So there's sort of different ways you can go about recreating kits. The most common way is just you get items that fit the same historical period and put them together. What I'm doing now is I'm actually taking a figurine of someone who likely existed, who was found in Laconia, so probably a Spartan, judging by his wealth and level of equipment. And I want to basically recreate every single piece that guy has, down from the embroidery on his chiton to the crest box pattern. So that's what I've been working on. So he is, sort of around about 300 champions. It would be a sort of landmark that this panoply could fit for. However, he'd probably be suitable for Greco-Persian wars as well. Even my shield blazon, his shield unfortunately is no longer on his figurine, but I've taken the blazon from a little sort of clay stele that was found in the Temple of Artemis. So it's all of my sort of items I've focused around that bronze figure or other Laconian artifacts to sort of link myself into that Laconian region. But of course, that isn't the only way that you can do it, and there isn't really anything that we know of that's distinctly Spartan in this period. Most armament would sort of be universal around the Hellenic world. Little bits like that I think are really fun when you delve into the specifics. Like, no public member is ever going to know that those things link to Sparta.
You're building up a personality, and that kind of, it sounds like, helps you inhabit the world that you're trying to kind of enter. I'm curious, does your Spartan have a name, or are, you know what I mean? Does it go that far?
So we like to sort of pick something that still has our name. So our group leader, Andrew, is Andromachus. But then we have some of our members have gone in as Brasida. So, you know, it's sort of up to whoever the heck wants to do it. So we see a sort of evolution from the archaic period. You see, not standard, but you see the existence of basically fully armored hoplites. So you see helmets, cuirasses, upper and lower arms, thigh armor, greaves, anatomical foot armor, even ankle armor, stuff like that. You are a little bit more spread out. You're a little bit more of an individual fighting force, a little bit more of a unit. You have hoplites throwing javelins. You have javelineers and slingers and rock throwers behind them throwing around. A little bit like a massive game of dodgeball, really. So we see sort of more armor in that period, likely because you're a more exposed individual. Evolution of hoplite warfare changes and develops into that sort of classical phalanx. The need for more armor drops because you are physically covered by people. So, and of course, we don't know all of this for sure, but there's these clues sort of point us to this. So I'm generalizing a little bit here. But when we get to the Persian Wars, people often have a tendency of thinking them as classical hoplites. But they are really in the heart of the transitional period, which is that really blurry fade between archaic and classical style warfare. And that's sort of where my panoply sits. It's a transitional panoply. We're not necessarily one, you know, full solid snake. We're sort of different units that butt up shoulder to shoulder. So a parataxis is maybe more of an authentic period term to describe this as. We still see, you know, decently well armored guys. We see greaves, we see cuirasses, helmets, but for whatever reason we lose the foot armor, we lose the thigh armor, we lose the arm armor, and we start to even possibly lose thorax armor as well, which is quite interesting. The spears get longer as well. So we sort of think of the hoplite dory, which we sort of classify as the classical spear. A little bit of a blurry classification. We have a tendency in the 21st century to have everything in groups, which the ancient people wouldn't really say. They sort of say, this is my helmet and this is my spear, not this is my late archaic Corinthian helmet. So we sort of like to sort of very, you know, categorize things that they didn't necessarily do. So we sort of see that style of warfare evolve, and armament changes to meet that. When we get into the Peloponnesian War, of course, you're in an era of mass war. So, you know, 30-year period of war between opposite ends of the Greek world fighting each other. And we see mass conscripts of men. So whereas before the hoplite class maybe was a little bit more of a higher up aristocratic level, we're now seeing, you know, Sparta sending helots to fight as hoplites who would previously have been sort of light troops.
I think people have this sense, the more armor, the better. My question for you is, having been in the reenactment world, what can you say about wearing, like, the pros and cons of wearing your full panoply versus wearing maybe a lighter kit? Like, what does that allow you to do? What are the limitations of the one, you know, that sort of thing? How does it feel?
Yeah, great question. One of the reasons I think that we also see a lack of armor is because how do you transport it? Right, so when we're getting into the Peloponnesian War and you're traveling across Greece, you're like, I'm packing more provisions, more camp stuff. Maybe I can't take this extra armor, so we drop it. Or I don't want to wear all this armor to do a 3-day march, so I'm going to not take it. So that's also a possible sort of economic reason as to why you would leave it behind. So yes, so I have a very armored panoply, and I love wearing it. It's obviously armor has to fit you well, and if it fits you well, you're a little bit restricted, but overall you are perfectly capable. You're a mobile unit. You can run, you can jump, you can lie down, you can stand up, you can do all sorts of stuff. But it gets a little bit more awkward, of course, over long periods. So we do this 3-hour march through rolling hills and really, like, you know, knee-length grass. It's quite a lot of work. Long periods of wearing armor just exhaust you. You don't necessarily feel it, but you're heavier, which obviously over a long period of time is quite tiring.
One other thing that I wanted to mention, when you're in Greece, right, I'm imagining that the weather and the terrain plays a huge role in how you're feeling in your armor. How does it feel to wear a full panoply in Greece? What season are you typically traveling there? And do you notice any, like, environmental differences when you're actually, like, there?
It's bloody hot. That's what I'm saying. So yes, that's a massive part of it. So people often assume that armor gets really hot. You can cook an egg on armor or burn your skin alive. This is not the case. Okay, I've made several videos actually addressing this point now. So if you leave armor out in the sun without a body in it, it will get hot. The difference is I wouldn't recommend doing that. So if you're wearing armor in the sun, it essentially acts as a heat sink. So it will regulate your temperature. You can still get hot, of course, the same way that you will get hot in regular clothing. But the idea that wearing armor, at least Hoplite level armor, heats you up like a frying pan isn't quite correct. And overheating in a battlefield situation is a massive danger. If you start to go dizzy, you drop, you're dead, right? But Greece is a really hostile environment in the sense that obviously we're there in August, so it's really hot. And it's very dry. And there's a lot of these prickly, thorny bushes that will just sort of rip your feet and legs open. Again, I'd like to outline, you get very hot if you're not in armor. So the armor isn't the contributing factor to the heat. It's just you're in the Greek sun in August getting blasted down for days on end. You're going to get very hot and you're going to get tired. And that's, of course, something that happens is the Persians cut off the Greeks' water supply. And that's a massive problem if you can't drink.
Did ancient Greek hoplites have water bottles?
Well, it's really interesting because I don't think we really have any depictions of them, but of course you would have to take them. So we sort of then look at later period examples of simple canteens, water skins or ceramics. Logistically speaking, you need a canteen of some sort.
This is a huge question I have now. How much agency do you ascribe to the historical individual? And what I mean by that is sometimes you'll see comments like, how long was a spear? Or did hoplites go barefoot or not barefoot? And do you think it's a legitimate answer to say, well, maybe some people did and some people didn't, or maybe the spear was 7 feet, or maybe it was 6 feet, depending on the individual person's, the resources available to them, their skill in being able to create armor, their personal favorite color, if you're asking what color did they paint their shield, that sort of thing. How much do how do you wrestle with that?
Well, I often say, I think one of the ways that you can tell if someone knows what they're talking about is if they give you multiple answers to one question. So, when you get people that tell you this is the way, I question that. So we sort of see that as well, as we like to generalize. Hoplites fought with the 8-foot dory. Well, hold on a minute. It's not like they got a tape measure out and measured it. We see quite a big leeway in these. We call it the dory, and we assume that the dory is a specific spear. The dory is just a spear, right? So it's typically a double-ended spear, counterweighted, but we don't see this universal, everything was sort of factory output. So fundamentally, these guys weren't issued equipment, and that's something that's so important. Is modern military, you're issued equipment. We don't really see uniforms appearing until the age of gunpowder. So relatively new in the terms of military history. For vast majority, you don't actually have a uniform assigned to you. You don't have a color that you're wearing or a specific sort of level of armor. So these guys are buying and painting and decorating the stuff the way that they like them, as far as we know. We see so much individualism within the hoplite world, even though they fought in a very unindividualistic way for most of hoplite warfare. But yeah, you wanted to look good, you wanted to look flashy, and that's something that I love so much about reenacting, is you can get so absorbed into that, creating something that you yourself is so personal to. We have someone in our group has their dog on their shield because their dog passed away. So you have that personalized element of it, of this is something that means something to me. I will take my best friend to battle with me. And then you have someone that's a dog taking a poop. So you see that difference, which is something that exists historically. So we see that difference of, you can tell this guy's a bit of a jokester. This guy's a very religious person. He has something that's, Athena is on his shield. So we sort of see very personalized, unregulated equipment, and I think that's something that brings the humanity to the ancient people so much.
I encountered this kind of question when I was putting together my kit for my sidearm, and for people who may not know, the swords are sidearms. It's the spears that's doing most of the work, but it was like the Xiphos or the Kopis, right? That was kind of what I was deciding, and I felt like the Kopis it moved kind of like a saber, and that was the only kind of martial arts sword practice I had had up until that point, and so that's kind of what I decided to carry, even though I know Xenophon describes them more typically as cavalry swords, right? And I kind of had to make this decision, well, if I was an ancient Greek hoplite in this time period and I had these swords, potentially available to me, could I just make this decision, well, my buddy carries this on a horse, but I'm just going to carry it on foot? I know that there are still debates about that. Do you have any, maybe you can set the record straight.
So for me, we see it depicted. I would say the Xiphos is probably the most commonly depicted sword. I would say, just sort of rounded. But yeah, we definitely see the coppice being used on horseback, but also not. And I think typically we see longer copy days used on horseback. So we do definitely see infantry styles of coppice. It was basically one or the other. So I mean, see different variations in that. You know, the Xiphos goes through length. Even like, you know, in the 300s, you even see basically kitchen knife sized Xiphos, which is really interesting. Whether we even categorize that as a Xiphos anymore, I guess is a different question.
And you might have some insight into that. I've heard a shorter Xiphos is perhaps advantageous if you're in really close ranks. And
absolutely.
You don't have enough movement or space to move your arm all the way, to kind of draw it back.
Yes. So, and you know, and there's a famous quote of basically a Spartan who complains about how short his sword is, and he's told, "Well, bridge that distance with one step forward." So we're very much told you're supposed to close the gap with these swords. If you had a long sword, you're suddenly up here. You're doing that. You're trying not to elbow the guy next to you, getting caught. You have to get that over your shield. But that is not advantageous.
Are there any things similar to this? Anything that you have learned that you think is like knowledge that could have only come from being in the reenactment group?
I think nothing can teach you about a phalanx more than being in a phalanx. Feeling, you know, some scholars would say you're overlapping shields this much. Some say you're leaving a couple, you know, feet distance. Well, we can test that, right, and try that. That side of it of, you know, other people talk about that, but we do it, right? I can tell you that this works really well from this sort of standpoint. But I'm now wearing a panoply that is, you know, museum level replica armor. So that can give you an insight of that this is as close as we can create today to armor of the time. What is it like to wear that? So fundamentally, I think where reenactment does a really, really good job is giving you that personal touch to the people of the past, right? You can sort of feel through proxy the closest that we sort of can today to what they might have been feeling. Maybe we're all wrong, but I don't think that we are. Scholarly histories is obviously great. Scholars are awesome, and reenactment is awesome, and they both have their pros and cons, and I think that both of them together is the superpower of sort of tackling historical events.
People are always working better when they're working as a team.
You know, thank you so much for coming on the channel, Adam. I can tell that your videos also are done, you know, for the love of the game. Go ahead and subscribe. Do you want to give your channel one more shout out?
Actually, I think I forgot to even mention, yeah, so those of you that don't know me, I'm sort of the host of the channel Leonidas Sparta, so I cover all sorts of ancient Greek history. So yeah, if you guys would like to sort of get a little bit more of my commentary on ancient history and my perspective, then yeah, if you wouldn't mind checking it out, that would be greatly appreciated.
And I will put a link in the description for that as well.